One of the most, I think, overlooked connections in One Piece is the importance of Buddhism, the 6 paths of transmigration, and the journey through the 4 noble worlds in order to reach nirvana. In my opinion, this belief is central to One Piece's story, and the many spiritual aspects Oda explores are viewed through this lens. This is a deep topic, honestly. I cannot talk about all of the connections in one video, so let's just start with an easy one: Zoro's future God mode. Strap in. Hey YouTube, JoBoy here. So, the disclaimer for this video is that I do not practice Buddhism, and so my knowledge of it is fundamentally limited. Even for those who practice, there is much important nuance and differences, and I imagine sometimes many years of dedicated study may not be enough to fully understand it at the level that you can teach it effectively. So it is probabilistic I get something wrong, or explain poorly, or much more simply than is actually the case. It's also pretty likely that I may switch between very different and important sects of belief unintentionally through ignorance. 70% of Japanese identify as Buddhist. I think Oda may as well. I believe here I'll be mainly talking about Mahayana or Zen Buddhism, which is a common form in Japanese and has direct parallels and is alluded to in the story of One Piece. But to understand this theory, you must understand some of the most central ideas in Buddhism, so I'm going to give it my best. I just ask you, put aside your Western philosophies. This video is not about what is the right beliefs about life, rather understanding and appreciating Buddhism as a concept, as Oda is probably using it in the story. Buddhists believe in karma, which is a kind of cosmic counter of one's goodness. Through the events of one's life and transmigration or reincarnation, karma is either gained or lost. Karma or action results from an intentional physical or mental act which has a consequence. In other words, acts of body and speech are driven by an underlying intention or will, and they are either unwholesome or wholesome because they are motivated by either unwholesome or wholesome intentions. Acts of body and speech are then the end products of particular kinds of mentality. At the same time, outside of acts of body and speech, karma can exist as a simple act of will, a forceful mental intention or volition that does not lead to an act of body or speech. It's the idea that you badly wanted to do something, but did not. Here I think that you can see some obvious parallels to Conqueror's Haki or willpower, and I think that here Oda may very well have been inspired. In this belief, there is no finite death, or the same view of hell and eternal damnation in more Western philosophies. We will touch on the 6 paths in a moment, but when one's life ends in a realm or path, another begins. Reincarnation. And in which realm this life begins depends on the actions in the life before it. All 6 paths are viewed as the realms of those who suffer and lack enlightenment. And only by conquering the 6 paths and reaching nirvana can one enjoy true freedom, which I think is a relevant goal within One Piece, wouldn't you say? I think that it's worth pointing out, though, an alternative understanding of the 6 paths or realms is that they are not physical places, but rather psychological states of mind or experiences in the world. That is to say, your lot in life and your experience in life was determined by your past life, and how you deal with that will affect your next life. But I really don't want to make this too complicated, because I believe in One Piece, these various realms or paths very much exist. This concept may be familiar to a lot of you through Naruto, the 6 paths of pain, but what is not pointed out enough is that the 6 paths hold significance to Zoro. Or Oda has been inspired to infuse concepts of these 6 paths and Buddhism into Zoro. Just after the time skip versus the Kraken, Zoro debuted the attack Sentoryu Ogi, Rokudo no Tsuji, which translated directly as 3 Swords Secret Skill, Crossroad of 6 Paths. But even further, in the conclusion of Zoro's fight against Kaku and his debut of the attack Ashura, Zoro states that he has chosen to walk the 6 paths. But we'll explain this particular moment better in the future. So from Zoro himself, it is not just simply that Oda decided to name his attacks after Buddhism and concepts from Buddhism. Zoro himself might actually practice it, because he as a character stated in the story believes in the six paths. And from other details we can gather that he believes in the six paths from the vantage of a Buddhist. I've always been interested about the religious aspects of Zoro. In Skypiea, he stated, "I don't believe in God." It's always made me wonder, is Oda going to throw in a religious element with Zoro? Why even bring this up? I think that from this moment, most assumed him to be atheist. But something that might go over the head of Western audiences is the fact that Buddhists also do not believe in God. The final supreme state of being, the Buddha, is not a god. And in fact, throughout the story, we can see that there is a certain spirituality about Zoro that is not necessarily highlighted, but is there. Another good example is that we see Zoro often practicing meditation. Meditation, again, common in Buddhism. Again, another subtle connection, Bushido, or the code of the samurai, the way of the warrior, something that Zoro practices. It's significantly derived from Zen Buddhism. Buddhism taught Stoicism and a genuine respect for life and death. The samurai did not fear death because it completed the cycle of life and did not let emotion complicate its understanding. Zen meditation also taught samurai to focus and to reach a higher level of thought. Buddhism has existed within Japan for the better part of 1500 years. I think that to a lot of Westerners you might be confused. Aren't Buddhists supposed to be pacifists, so how can a samurai be a Buddhist? But many of them were. Buddhism was foundational in the construction of samurai society and culture and the way they lived their lives. It's an element of Zoro that Oda has kept very, very secret because I'm beginning to wonder just how important it is to Zoro's story and his end game. But we'll come back to this. So what exactly are the six paths? Well, the six paths are generally divided into two groups, the fortunate paths and the unfortunate paths. The lowest path is the path of hell, or Naraka. One enters this realm by living an extraordinarily evil life, and in this realm one suffers prolonged, unimaginable torture, until over time the karma balances and one is reborn into a higher realm. The next two paths levels are dependent on your particular beliefs, but for the purpose of this video consider them distinct, but of subjective level between themselves. So, the path of the hungry ghost, or the Preta path. One enters this realm by being somewhat evil during their life, and in it you suffer from prolonged hunger and thirst until the karmic debt is paid and you get to be reborn into a higher realm. The path of the animal is the last of the three unfortunate paths. In this you are reborn as an animal. And it's worth pointing out here that although animals live in the same realm as humans, through a Buddhist eyes, these are distinct. Animals are believed to be driven by impulse and instinct, they prey upon one another, and they suffer. To be reborn as an animal is not considered to be a good thing. But many do consider it to be possible to reach nirvana and find enlightenment as an animal. And for a Buddhist, animals are revered because they believe them to be their ancestors who had lost their way. The lowest of the three fortunate paths is also debatable, but we will first discuss the human path. This is where we all are right now. In this life we have intelligence, and because of this, this path simultaneously grants the ability for great karmic gain or loss, depending on how this life is led. You can drop to hell, or you can enlighten. But in general, it is believed as a part of the fortunate paths, you suffer a great deal less than you would in the unfortunate paths. The next path is the path of the demigod, or the path of Ashura. Ashura are seen in two ways simultaneously, as demigods who have reached a further level of existence than humans, but also as angry or vengeful entities which fight the devas or the gods, and trouble humans. I think though in general it is believed that Ashuras are motivated by anger. That is really their defining characteristic, or flaw. And of course you know that Zoro has the technique called Ashura, which we will get back to. The last fortunate path is the path of gods or devas, noted for being the most pleasurable of the six paths containing all pleasures known to this earth. But importantly, it is believed that many can become stuck in this realm because of attachment. Because this realm is so pleasurable, you don't want to leave, and you don't enlighten, and thus fail to reach nirvana. I think that many in the Western world would be most confused by this path and associate it probably the most with our conceptions of heaven. But to a Buddhist, there is a step after this. Because to exist within the cycle of the six paths is to suffer. Even the Deva path, they still suffer. The goal is to awaken and enlighten, and thus escape the cycle. Because even as a diva, as enjoyable and as pleasurable as that realm is, you can go backwards. But we'll come back to this. An attack that I think that you are familiar with is Sentoryu Ogi Sanzen Sekai, literally translated as 3 sword style secret skill, 3000 worlds. This attack has appeared several times within the story, but we saw it first in the fight against Mihawk. It was the last attack Zoro used. This is a difficult concept to explain, so I'm going to choose to pass over most of the details. It will only confuse you. And hell, it might confuse you anyway. But essentially, this Buddhist idea of the 3000 worlds attempts to conceptualize the possibility that exists in every single moment and each instant of your life. What is vital here is all of these worlds exist within each other simultaneously every moment. There are 10 worlds or paths. We've discussed 6 of them already, which are the 6 paths, and outside of this cycle of suffering are the 4 higher paths, the 4 noble worlds of those enlightened or on the path to Buddhahood. 10 worlds, which all coexist within all of the others simultaneously, is 100 worlds, and other factors lead to 3000 worlds. I think that it's interesting here, as Oda drew this in the panel in chapter 51. He drew Zoro with 10 swords. 10 swords, I believe, representing 10 worlds. And although it isn't explicitly stated, I believe that it was this attack which really caught Mihawk's eye and led to Mihawk sparing him. In terms of One Piece, I believe that Zoro has the ability to in some way interact with all of these coexisting worlds, particularly the 6 paths. Because of course you know, we've actually seen him transform in the story, more times than you would think, all related to the 6 paths. I believe that is through understanding of Buddhism and understanding of the 6 paths can you come to understand Zoro's transformations that he has already shown and those that have yet to come. Of course, you already know about Zoro's technique, Demon Aura Ashura. What this is not entirely certain, but Kaku says this: he can show such a powerful illusion with his fighting spirit. Ashura therefore seems to be an extension of Zoro's spirit or soul, and is at least part illusion-based in nature. But people, I think, forget this isn't the only transformation Zoro has experienced in the story. Again, in the fight against Kaku, in fact, just before Ashura, Zoro shows us the technique Ichi and Ni Gorilla. During this attack, Zoro's biceps bulge unnaturally, as the aura of the gorilla appears behind him, and Zoro's attacks then are granted even greater strength than normal. I think that a lot of people shrug this off as not needing an explanation, because it's just so anime, you know? Some shit happens and you're just like, yeah, anime. But it is in fact a kind of unexplained magical ability that Zoro possesses, and I think that I have an explanation. This attack, 1 and 2 Gorilla, its source is the very same as Ashura. It is the very same thing, and Zoro has mastered it in the very same way. Zoro obviously walks the 6 paths of suffering. Specifically, the realm we see is that of the human path, but every realm coexists simultaneously. This is what Buddhist Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh has to say about embracing suffering. When a painful feeling comes up, we often try to suppress it. We don't feel comfortable when our suffering surfaces, and we want to push it back down or cover it up. But as a mindfulness practitioner, we allow the suffering to surface so that we can clearly identify it and embrace it. This will bring transformation and relief. The first thing that we have to do is accept the mud in ourselves. When we recognize and accept our difficult feelings and emotions, we begin to feel more at peace. When we see that mud is something that can help us grow, we become less afraid of it. The path of Ashura is often represented by anger, and anger is a form of suffering of those unenlightened. This is what occurred before Zoro's Ashura transformation against Kaku. I think that it's clear in this moment Zoro experienced anger. He embraced that suffering and allowed it to transform him, as the Buddhists teach. Only through this process can he identify that within himself and overcome it. It is through embracing suffering that Zoro becomes stronger. Here's another example from the movie Strong World.
このイーストブルーの馬の骨だ。だいたいあんなくだらねえ海一つ潰れたからといって世界に何の支障も出ねえんだよ。引き九刀流アシュライーストブルーで生まれた俺が馬の骨なら俺に切られるお前は一体何の骨だ。
And so here again we can see the very same thing. Something was specifically said that it makes sense would make Zoro angry. And again here he transformed into Ashura by, I believe, embracing that suffering, embracing his anger, and as a Buddhist would say, allowing it to transform him so that he may be able to overcome it and find peace. I quoted this before, but let's do so more accurately with context to what I have already said. Zoro said at the conclusion of the fight against Kaku, "Hardships are fine by me. I chose to walk the path of Ashura." I actually think that this is very similar to the concept of Zoro embracing Luffy's pain at the end of Thriller Bark, which again is another thing that we will come back to. He embraces his own suffering in order to understand it, control it, and conquer it. Just as Zoro chose to walk the path of Ashura, he can choose to walk the other paths as well. But I do imagine that there would be risks if Zoro were to lose control. I'm curious if Oda goes there. In Buddhism, it is said that those who master the fourth Dhyana Samadhi, or meditative absorption, are capable of creating bodies manifest of mind, or astral projections in which to travel through the various realms of existence. But let's focus on this quote, bodies manifest of mind. To a Buddhist, your soul or your spirit is the same as your consciousness or your mind. And as we talked about in my last theory video in regards to One Piece, I think that this might be the same as haki or your will. Zoro simply has a unique manifestation of haki through his practice of Buddhism, or meditative absorption. I think that that pretty well accords with Zoro's auras in his attacks. Buddhists explain auras through the understanding of mind and reality as an interdependent relationship. The qualities of one's mind, whether it be anxious and angry, or calm and tranquil, emanate into one's environment. And just before Zoro's attack, you see his demon aura emanating into the environment. All of this is explained by Zen Buddhism. It is also said that an enlightened mind is said to emanate luminosity as well. A lot of people I think gloss this over, but Zoro has many attacks that emanate the spirit or aura of animals. Just to name off a few, there are many: gorilla, dragon, lion, bull. The animal path is another one of the 6 paths, and I believe Zoro has learned to embrace that suffering as well, in the very same way. So the gorilla transformation is just the same as Ashura, and he could potentially have other forms of this in the future of the story. The animal path is traditionally thought to be similar to a hellish realm, because animals are believed in Buddhist texts to be driven by impulse and instinct. They prey upon each other and they suffer. More specifically, maybe, they are attacked and eaten by other animals, or live in fear of that. So to embrace this suffering, one would then have to understand their fear of being prey, or their desire to hunt. Just before Zoro uses Knee Gorilla against Kaku, he says this: "Could you have cut me if I were made of metal? I see. This isn't going to be easy." And he heavily breathes in. I believe here Zoro was influenced by his animal path, in this case his fear. At this point in the fight, Kaku had demonstrated his superiority and even claimed that Zoro could not defeat him. Maybe Zoro embraced his fear and allowed it to transform him. But if you include Ashura, these are just 2 of the 6 paths, 3 adding the human path. There are 3 more sufferings that Zoro could potentially master and gain strength from. Enbima Yonezu Onigiri, an upgrade of his common Onigiri attack, literally meaning Charm Demon Sleepless Night Ogre Cutter. In this attack, his swords appear to bend, and a ghostly aura emanates from him. Guys, I want to focus on the idea of his sword's bending. It's a magical element very similar to both the gorilla attack and Ashura, also not directly explained. The aura that you see behind Zoro is not the aura of Ashura though, nor is it the aura of an animal. I believe it to be the aura of the hungry ghost, one of the unfortunate paths. The hungry ghost and other restless spirits called preta are rebirths caused by karma of excessive craving and attachments. They do not have a body, are invisible, and constitute only subtle matter of a being. So as translated to the West, they are ghosts. Buddhist texts describe them as beings who are extremely thirsty and hungry. As a result of their karma, they are afflicted with an insatiable hunger for a particular substance or object. Traditionally, this is something repugnant or humiliating, such as cadavers or dead bodies or feces or poop. Though in more recent stories, this insatiable hunger can be anything, however bizarre. I think that Zoro may feel a hunger for battle and competition, say in a way to test his limits or grow from the challenge. Often Zoro in the story is portrayed as kind of impatient when dealing with those that are less than him. And I think that that may be what Zoro was experiencing during this scene. He hungers for the real fight. These enemies bored him, they were a waste of time. And just as in the previous examples, he embraces this suffering and allows it to transform him. In this case, possibly becoming more transient or ghost-like, such that his swords bend. In this, I believe Oda included some very, very subtle foreshadowing, as Inbima Yonezu is actually a pun for food. The pun in this case, the alternate reading is actually shrimp mayonnaise rice ball, and thus maybe foreshadows that this is a physical representation of Zoro walking the path of the hungry ghost.
俺はぼちぼち先に進む。俺にかなう気がしねえと気づいた時、お前は逃げるべきだった。お？何？体が動かない。一刀流！切られる！
There may actually be other applications of Zoro's mastery of the animal path already introduced in the story. In Punk Hazard against Monet, Zoro says this: "You should have run away earlier when you realized you couldn't defeat me. There are some things I don't want to slice up, but have you ever met a wild beast who promised they wouldn't bite? I haven't." And in the anime, the color of the entire world changed, almost as if Zoro's animal aura emanated around him and infused the very world itself. And in this moment, Monet could not move for fear. My theory here is that Zoro forced the suffering of the animal upon her, and she could not overcome it. This creates a different way in which Oda has used concepts from the six paths within Zoro's techniques. Attacks which possibly inflict suffering to another, or maybe a better way to explain would be the sharing of suffering. Through the use of Zoro's own spirit, he makes them walk the paths, and if they are not capable, they fold. I think that we may also see this to some extent in Zoro's technique, three-sword style secret technique, crossing of the six paths. In this, Zoro does not appear to swing his sword at all, rather a kind of energy emanates from him that forms a six-line slash. I do wonder whether this as well is a technique in which Zoro inflicts suffering, a physical manifestation of the suffering of one who walks all the paths. And if you cannot endure, you get sliced. And then afterwards, Zoro comments about how soft the Kraken is. Another potential application of this idea or similar is Zoro's attack, Pound Ho. A specific version of this is 108 Pound Phoenix Cannon. This is one of Zoro's favorite techniques, which he uses to literally launch slashes across great distances. What you need to know about this is that the pound part is a skewed reading of the kanji for kaisha, which is the Buddhist term for worldly desires with evil thoughts. So this attack might be something similar. Attacks in some way related to Zoro's own worldly desires, or evil thoughts, physically manifest, perhaps as a way to release them. But these are just some thoughts that I wanted to include because they add to the video, but don't necessarily fit in what we were discussing previously. I want to look at potential powers that Zoro may have in the future of the story that he has not yet revealed. The texts vary in their details, but typically describe the path of hell, or narakas, as numerous hellish regions, each with different forms of intense suffering, such as 8 extremely hot hellish realms, 8 extremely cold, being partially eaten alive, beating, and other forms of torture in proportion to the evil karma accumulated. This is not an aura that Zoro has demonstrated in the story yet, but I believe off-screen he has, and will in the future of the story again. I imagine to emanate and embrace the aura of hell, Zoro would have to experience unimaginable pain and torture first, experience that suffering, embrace it, and allow it to transform him. I'm personally reminded of when Zoro accepted Luffy's pain. How he dealt with that is unknown and off-screened, but now I envision him transforming as he comes to endure this torture and the suffering of hell. Kuma even says this beforehand, "I will give you a glimpse of hell." What I extracted from his body just now is pain and suffering. And this, I think Oda was pretty subtle, but at the same time very direct, if you know what you are looking for. Because of Buddhism and Bushido, Zoro does not fear death, and by embracing it, it could not kill him. Just hypothetically, I believe that this path is best suited as an illusion which changes the world around Zoro into hell itself, or using this ability, as we discussed before, to inflict hell upon others. The narakas are described as places of intense, unbearable hot and cold. We could simultaneously see physical attacks and auras of both fire or ice. And I'm simultaneously reminded of other characters within the One Piece story, such as Brook, who also has ice powers, the origin of which he states is the underworld, the chill of the underworld, or maybe the chill of hell. And both Luffy and Sanji, who experience more pain than anybody else in the story. That's actually one thing I think that a lot of people don't understand about Sanji. He takes a beating almost every arc, and he grew up that way as well. Luffy's Red Hawk, or Sanji's Diable Jambe, both are attacks of fire. Are these all physical manifestations of the suffering of hell, as described by the 6 paths within Buddhism? Even though these characters, different to Zoro, may not obviously be following the teachings of Buddhism. I just think that it's really interesting to think about this. For instance, Brook, who has actually experienced death. Was it from this death that perhaps he gained access to the path of hell? And by confronting this pain, this torture, he unlocked similar powers as to Zoro. Or looking at this from another way, the narakas just represent intense torture, and that could mean something other than physical pain. I think that emotional pain could work as well. All of Brook's friends and old crewmates, he believes them dead and gone. He lives within that endless agony, but yet he still pushes forward, which I think in a way would help you master the path of hell. Put simply, guys, I believe that the concept that Oda is playing with is that through experiencing intense suffering or torture or pain, you then have the possibility of mastering it, using it so it does not break you, using it because you do not fear it. And it also makes me think a little bit about Usopp, because Usopp is another one of those characters that sustains a lot of damage. But of course, currently he does fear it. But will that always be the case? I believe One Piece may be a parable of Buddhist teachings, and the core structure of it, and in-game goals, all reflect the discoveries of the Buddha and those who followed. In Buddhism, beliefs around the soul appear to be complex, but I believe it's simply understood that we all have souls or consciousness, and these are reborn into another upon our death. At its root, the soul is thought to walk the 6 paths when they suffer from desire or ignorance. Here's a quote: "It is the not knowingness of things as they truly are, or of oneself as one really is." Guys, here I'm talking about very important and fundamental aspects of One Piece. The search for the truths of this world, such as the Void Century, and the realities of the present, and why it is like that, such as the inner workings of the world, Cypherpole and the Celestial Dragons and the Revolutionary Army, and racism and slavery, and the abuse of power and position, and the truth of yourself through experience and discovery, which I think that all the Straw Hats are slowly coming to understand why it is that they are as they are, and accepting that, and understanding that, discovering what they truly want and why. As Luffy says time and time again, I'm gonna be the Pirate King. That's what Luffy thinks that he wants. But at the end of the story, that won't be it. It'll be deeper. Luffy searches for freedom. And although the Pirate King might be the most free in this world, trapped in the cycle of the six paths, and as part of the human path, you suffer still, which leads into the importance of the journey and of their dreams. Buddhists believe that by accomplishing one's desires, it brings you one step closer to achieving enlightenment. When you come to understand that it will never be enough, that you will never be satiated. All of the characters in this world, but more specifically all of the Straw Hats, walk the six paths because of their lasting unfulfilled dreams, desires, and cravings, and/or their ignorance of reality, of themselves, or that of the world. Through One Piece, all of this will be discovered, or at the very least, they will significantly progress forward. And an argument can be made that these Straw Hats will have the opportunity by the end of the story to become enlightened. Even if Oda doesn't actually go there, it may be implied if you are reading One Piece as a Buddhist. And if Oda is in fact a Buddhist, I don't think that he could imagine an any greater end of the story for his characters. This is what all Buddhists strive to achieve, although it may be subtle and vague simply because the story of One Piece is global. The greatest achievement in Buddhism is true freedom, and that can only be experienced in nirvana. As Gold D. Rogers says, inherited will, the destiny of the age, the dreams of its people. As long as people continue to pursue the meaning of freedom, these things will never cease. To a Buddhist, if you continue to pursue the meaning of freedom, eventually you'll find Buddha's teachings, and along the way you will accomplish your dreams and fulfill your destiny. By the end of the story, with no other worldly desires left, having achieved their dreams and discovered their ignorances both of themselves and the world, the Straw Hats could be free of the paths, free of their suffering, and discover what it really means to be free. I think that it's about here that I would like to point out the possible significance of rebirth, both in terms of Buddhism and in the world of One Piece. Here in mostly Western society worlds, we fight the idea that Luffy is Joy Boy, but to those who practice Buddhism, they probably see this as the obvious, realistic answer. Luffy is Joy Boy because they both share the same consciousness or soul, reborn, trapped within the six paths because of unfulfilled dreams and lasting ignorance. This also makes it possible for Gold D. Roger to have shared this very same consciousness or soul, and that has been reborn into Luffy. This would simultaneously explain Poseidon as well. But let's bring this back to Zoro because this video is supposed to be about him. Guys, it's possible Zoro's endgame ambition really is not to be the strongest swordsman. As a Buddhist would believe, you have dreams, but there's something more underlying that you keep searching for. In much the same way that Luffy's endgame ambition may not be to become the Pirate King, it's possible for Zoro it's something deeper than that as well. In Zoro's case, being the strongest may not bring him the happiness he seeks, or do that itself, but only through achieving that would he come to realize it. This is the importance of the journey and accomplishing your dreams. I would like to draw a parallel with Mihawk. Would you say that Mihawk is happy? Truly happy? Or is he just bored? Is Mihawk frustrated that he sits at the top with nobody left to challenge him? Does Mihawk suffer? In Buddhism, there exists the idea of being stuck within the path of the divas. I really do not think that Oda would wish that fate upon Zoro. The realm of the gods, or divas, is the most pleasure-filled among the six realms. A diva does not need to work, and is able to enjoy in the heavenly realm all pleasures found on earth. However, the pleasures of this realm lead to attachment, lack of spiritual pursuits, and therefore no nirvana. To endure this kind of suffering, I think Zoro must experience intense pleasure and attachment. In terms of One Piece, I believe Zoro would experience this most strongly when fueled by his passion for fighting and battle. I believe Zoro enjoys the battle and testing his limits, and in a way this pleasure could keep him trapped within the six paths, such that he would not ascend to Buddhahood and achieve enlightenment. For me, this transformation is most likely to be seen in a long drawn-out battle against an equal, a battle which Zoro comes to enjoy more than any other. And through experiencing this suffering and embracing it, it might also transform him as he efforts to overcome it. And I think that it's likely this suffering will provide the power necessary that he may need to win, if he can overcome it. Devas within Buddhism are godlike beings who possess greater strength in life than regular humans. In this state, it's then perhaps obvious he would be stronger, but I also believe Zoro's haki will become even more powerful as his life force grows. The higher orders of Diva also shine with their own intrinsic luminosity, which I imagine as a bright white permeating aura, God mode. Most Divas are also capable of constructing illusory forms by which they can manifest themselves to the beings of the lower paths. This then begs the question, is this Zoro's most normal state, and the suffering he's understood and accepted the least? As a Diva, he can access all of the other paths and form illusions. We've already seen this in the story. But a transformation into a Diva, or God mode, requires you to understand and embrace that suffering, which he has not done. Not yet. In the pursuit of the art of the sword and his goal to become the strongest, has Zoro been consumed by the pleasure and contentment of the journey and practice? Again, guys, I'm reminded of Mihawk, who despite becoming the strongest is still not yet satisfied. Is Mihawk bound to the six paths because of his suffering as a Diva? So I imagine that Mihawk does not have a God mode, and that may ultimately be what separates Zoro and Mihawk by the end of the story. But how this will actually manifest in the world of One Piece is completely up to Oda. All I know is that it seems likely, at some point in the story, Zoro must embrace this suffering too, and from it grow to conquer the six paths and achieve enlightenment, as all Buddhist and Zoro himself strives to achieve. But yeah, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you understood what I was trying to say. If you'd like to share this video, I'd much appreciate it. It took a lot of work to make. But as always, guys, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.